Okay, let's talk about where we've been and where we're going. First off, we created a survey that we had more than 700 participants take. And those 700 participants answered questions on a survey that was designed to give us answers to tough questions and help us formulate a genuine understanding of people's desired development of the project. We developed a series of priorities for each type of use that we expected to see on the project, broken down into two primary categories: residential and commercial uses. On the residential side of things, you'll see the slide in front of you. The survey supported detached mid-density and attached mid-density uses, generally speaking, anywhere on the site, outside of the parkland areas. We established a ceiling on the residential densities that people were comfortable with. And there are several images in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen that identify densities that are inconsistent with what people wanted to see. A score of anything less than 2 indicates that the densities were inappropriate for the site based on how the survey was structured. Ultimately, we respected the results of that survey throughout our design process, and they're embodied in the master plan presentation that we have for you today. On the commercial side of things, the survey yielded similar findings, similar detailed findings on what people would like to see on the site and what they would not like to see on the site. We established a concept of what was dense for the site and what was appropriate. Certain neighborhood retail uses were agreeable to most people taking the survey, including overt support for a neighborhood grocery store and restaurant uses. We further established that well-designed mixed use was appropriate for the site, which is represented in the image 2.3 in the middle row on the left-hand side of the screen. We pointed out that for mixed-use project to be truly functional, it needed an office space component, which helps from an internal traffic capture perspective to make the overall mixed-use project work better. We clearly established that regional retail uses are inappropriate for the site. And we also established through the survey process that some scales and uses are not what people would like to see built on the site, as they are too intense. And those are represented by the images, the crate and barrel image, and then the two images on the bottom of the screen as well, that people voted were too intense for the site. We respected those details in our design process, and they're clearly represented in our conceptual master plan. We also noted that we could do both a regional use from an economics perspective, and that we could also do a very low density use from an economics perspective. The second concept, the low density use concept, we rejected, and we rejected that because it did not meet our goal of creating a legacy project, and it was inconsistent with both the BCRC design guidelines and the survey results. Ultimately, what this resulted in was some great survey results, and we listened. We actually listened to the input from the broader neighborhood, and we incorporated as much of the survey results and guidelines as possible to create the overall legacy project that we're going to present today. More specifically, we listened in greater detail to those that will be most impacted by the development. We met with the folks north of the project on 45th Street, and we found out that they wanted to both access the project, and they wanted better access to their homes. There's kind of a dangerous street condition on 45th in terms of the traffic pulling in and out of some of those driveways. And so it's a benefit to the folks on the north boundary of the project to have internal access to their homes, the backs of their homes from our site. And so you'll see in the master plan that we intend to facilitate that access for them. We also met with the folks on Idlewild, which is in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, several times to understand their concerns and unique needs as it relates to the project. And we listened to those individuals as well, and we paired equally matched housing to their housing along that property line. We also met with the folks in Oakmont, and we're incorporating some of their good ideas into the project, specifically the scale and massing and connectivity to the project and traffic planning throughout their community. We're also continuing to do some additional traffic planning with them on various traffic calming devices that we might be able to incorporate into the site to help make it a more harmonious boundary on that side of things. We took the survey results, the BCRC design principles, which were a huge help, and we merged those into a guiding vision statement and 6 guiding principles to measure our performance as we moved through the design process. On the screen are the BCRC design principles, and they've been a phenomenal help to us in terms of understanding what the neighborhood wants to see on the site and ultimately incorporating those items into the project. You can take a minute to read these design principles as they are a great summary of what the neighborhood has been thinking about as it relates to the site over the past several years. Ultimately, that resulted in a vision statement that we created to help guide us through the design process. And the vision statement is based on the survey results. It's also based on the BCRC design principles. I won't read the slide to you, but please take a moment to read some of the concepts that we have here that incorporate into our vision statement, as those were the guiding principles in the creation of this master plan. Overall, our objective was to create a legacy community, and in order to do that, we identified the need for equity, economy, and ecology. On the equity side of things, the notion there is that we create a common vision with the neighborhood that enables us to create a shared purpose relationship with the neighborhood in executing that common vision. Ultimately, execution of a project is one of the biggest challenges, and creation of an incredible vision is, in some cases, in some ways, the easy part, and then going and actually executing on that vision and making sure that it comes to fruition in the way that we want it to, that we all collectively want it to, is the challenging part. And so our goal is to create that common vision by effectively giving everybody as much as we possibly can as it relates to the project. And then once we have that common vision, to go take the strength of all of the people behind that vision and execute on the project. And so that's our overall objective. Ultimately, economy, the project needs to be financially viable in order for it to work. And it needs to also, from our perspective, have a diversity of housing typologies to help foster that economy. And then on the ecology side of things, we're making sure that we pay particular attention to sustainable standards within the project. Ultimately, we want to build the Grove as a legacy quality neighborhood and a model for innovative mixed use and urban infill development. So in an effort to ensure that we're executing on that vision statement, we created 6 principles to help guide us throughout the project, and then ultimately to act as a standard that we can evaluate our performance against when we get to this point, or when we get to the point where we have a final master plan. And those principles are in front of you. They really focus on in creating an inviting space, developing high-quality parks and open space, establishing a vibrant people-oriented development pattern that promotes connectivity and prioritizes pedestrian and bicycle circulation over cars, to establish a restorative approach to the development of the site by integrating sustainable strategies and honoring the history and natural character of the site. Create an economically viable development model that maximizes the mix of uses and captures the essence of Austin living. And finally, to shift the conventional interaction between developer and neighborhood to a shared purpose relationship. Based on the process, we created our master plan. And when I say our master plan, I mean it's not Milestone's master plan, it's not the city's master plan, but it's a collective of all the different input that we've received from the neighborhood and Milestone and the city. And so when I say our plan, I mean it's collectively our plan. Quite a bit of effort's gone into this on both your part and on our part to create something that we can all be proud of. You should see your fingerprints on this master plan that are coming out through the survey process. I said at the beginning, and have throughout all of my zoning cases, that collaborative process almost always makes for a better project, and that is unequivocally the case here. We've learned so much about the site that we otherwise would not have learned if not for the engagement with the neighborhood. And that's had a profound impact on the conceptual master plan that we're about to present to you. So without further delay, here's the conceptual master plan. The best way to understand a two-dimensional image and how it'll translate into a livable project is to slowly walk through each element of the project. So in a few minutes, I'm going to walk you through the key elements of the project. First off, is the plan perfect at this point? No, it's not. But with everyone's prior input and the input as we move through the next 30 to 45 days that we're asking from y'all, we're going to get it as close to perfect as we can. We believe that we have incorporated into the master plan core elements of what everyone wants to see, but we also are certain that additional refinement is needed. Once we have a final common vision, we're asking for your support with the city so that we can expeditiously move the plan through the city's laborsome process. It's important to acknowledge that notion of execution as the most difficult part of the project. And we're going to conceive of this great vision, and then we're going to need your help in executing. And so ultimately, over the next 30 to 45 days, we're really looking for your support of this master plan. So we'd love your feedback in that 30 to 45 day time frame, and then we'd love to be able to go present this in a way that moves through the city quickly.
And I'm going to be jumping in a little bit throughout the presentation of this master plan to add some additional thoughts and insight as we look through the plan. First of all, to get you oriented a little bit, you see 45th Street on the top of the screen here. Bull Creek Road runs along the left side of the screen with Westminster located here, the Post Apartments located in this general area. And on the right side, you have Shoal Creek. Broadly speaking, I think you'll see the fingerprints of your input easily apparent in this plan as we present it. Density is focused towards the north and west end of the site where compatible uses are located. There's a large signature park on Shoal Creek. Uses are residential in nature throughout the southern half of the site, and ample green space is sprinkled throughout the project. What will become more apparent as we walk you through the project in detail is that the Grove is also welcoming, inviting, exciting, and sustainable, the legacy quality project that we've envisioned together.
Okay, so let's start our walk through the project. We included more than 2 acres of open space across the front of the project to better improve connectivity and the beauty of the project. The neighborhood and we wanted to keep some natural elements along the edge of the Grove, which will serve as an invitation into the project, beckoning people into the greater gathering and open spaces within. We will provide an area along the front of the project to pay tribute to the bluebonnets that are grown at the front now and located throughout portions of the site. We will include innovative water quality and filtration bioswales across the front of the site to ensure sustainability of water quality on the site. To accomplish the collective vision for a high-quality project, it will be necessary to remove the ugly power lines and abuse by telecom providers to underground locations across the front of the project, which comes at great expense to the project but helps enhance the overall vision. Robert?
And this will be a really unique condition along Bull Creek Road, a generous, well-landscaped greenway with native plantings and wildflowers and a multi-use trail, a thread of nature and active recreation, as depicted at the lower left of this slide, but contrasted against a high-quality urban edge. This generous setback helps to avoid the canyon feel that some were worried about along Bull Creek Road, while still providing an urban character and relationship to the street. We also envision, as depicted in the second image at the bottom of the screen, safe harbor pedestrian crossings at key locations in Bull Creek Road to both calm traffic and create a safer way for pedestrians to cross and access the project. I also want to take a moment here to explain the street section graphics that you'll see throughout the project. What you see is at the top is a cross section through a specific site, which is indicated where that would be located on the master plan as well. And then stretched out below that section is a plan view of the same area. So you see the travel lanes of Bull Creek Road, a multi-use trail, generous landscape setback, and then the buildings over here on the right. You'll see this type of graphic standard utilized throughout the presentation.
The mixed-use nucleus of the community is the beating heart of the commercial portion of the project to meet the daily needs of the surrounding neighborhood. It will include sidewalk cafes with ample gathering spaces and generously wide street sections in front of the shops and restaurants. It will also include a green spaces throughout that area, as well as green spaces woven throughout the community. We will have neighborhood retail on the ground floor of these buildings, including a lot of services for the broader neighborhood serviced by local retailers. The uses above the inviting entrance into the project will be office, apartment, and or assisted living. The use immediately to the north of the entry road along Bull Creek is planned to be a neighborhood grocery store where we believe that we will have the choice of high-quality grocers. The use on the northernmost portion of the site will be an architecturally unique building with an appropriately matched unique user that is yet to be determined.
I want to take a minute to talk about the main retail street. The main retail street, which is located right through here, is the beginning of an enticing journey into the project, from Bull Creek Road back to the park. The streetscape section is very generous in width, with appropriate massing on either side and lots of trees. You can see in the section we envision a double row of trees on each side of the street. Most of the cars are pulled off of the street into structured parking with limited teaser parking at street level, which prioritizes the person over the automobile. And while the plaza and park that we'll address a little later in the presentation will make for major destinations along this street, the generous section also allows for smaller people spaces, or parklets, along the length. These are essentially little cafe or hangout spaces that are sprinkled in between parking spaces where you pull out parking and replace it with a larger, more generous area for people to inhabit. The result is that this thrusts human interactions out into the street, because above all, it's the people who will make the village center work.
Our focus on the retail will be on local users, local Austin businesses that we can incorporate into the project. And our goal here is to ensure that the character that we all love about Austin is incorporated into the project and becomes a part of the neighborhood's charm. One of the focal elements of the project is the large public plaza that leads into the incredible park space of the project. The size and scale of the plaza is put into perspective with the image in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. It's about the same size as that image represents. The use of this square are innumerable. There's farmer markets, different neighborhood uses, small music offerings, and just a generally amazing gathering space in the middle of some incredible restaurants and neighborhood retail. The square will be surrounded on three sides with rooftop decks, cafes that merge into the open space of the plaza, and additional great Austin businesses with a focus on creating and energizing the gathering space. We also intend to incorporate green into the space through different forms, trees, plantings, and grass areas throughout that space, in addition to the possibility of a splash pad.
This area is envisioned as the community commons at the heart of the project, a vibrant people space with a variety of uses sprinkled throughout. Water features, ample shade, a mix of hard and soft surfaces. It's a really big space, but with small spaces within. The plaza is more than an acre in size, but at the same time it distills much of the experience of the entire project right here into its center. You transition from an exciting urban environment on the west end of the plaza that bleeds out through restaurants into the site's signature grove of trees on the east. And that experience is really depicted on a broader scale with this transect or cross-section through the site here. And the transect section at the bottom basically follows the line shown on the map here. What you can see as you look at this is what we think will be a really unique condition on this site. You go very rapidly from an active urban retail environment through the plaza and out into the park into a much more natural condition. And this is a condition that I think will be one of the most memorable parts of this project, something that really both creates the character and the distinct nature of the project. At the same time, the other thing you can see here is another notion of trying to preserve some of the existing views of downtown for the public in this plaza. And the idea is that the plaza itself will be slightly elevated and also aligned with this greenway here, which we'll discuss a little bit later in the presentation. But this greenway is aligned with the UT Tower and will help to frame that view. The slight elevation of the plaza will help to offer broader views as well of the skyline, which will be even more enhanced from some of the rooftop decks and other surrounding uses.
One of the members of our design team commented to me that one of the great things about his job is that he had the opportunity, if he did his job well, to identify things that you can give to the visitors and guests of the project. And this public space is going to be one of those gifts, and even more so, the gift of some of these views of downtown that'll be there for the next 100+ years is something that we're excited to be able to incorporate into the project, and has been the result of great design effort to preserve those views and to create, with some elevation change in that area of the project, to create the opportunity for those views. So we're certainly excited about that. Those views will also be part of the rooftop decks that we intend to incorporate into the project on some of the restaurants within the project. Our intention is to have some unbelievable restaurants within the Grove and unbelievable views from those decks as well.
Another exciting restaurant use that basically bridges the transition between the plaza and the park are the Parkside Restaurants. These restaurants will deliver an essential Austin experience, dining outdoors surrounded by magnificent live oaks. The image on the bottom left is the Park Chalet in San Francisco, one of my favorite places. You can see here how park and restaurant can merge into a single great experience. Here you can basically go in, order your food, and come find a place to sit in the park where your food will be brought to you. This is the kind of experience that we envision as enlivening the edge of the park here. We also feel that the restaurants are an appropriate use here because they represent a lower intensity of construction, as most likely single-story structures, but that will help us preserve the trees and the open nature of the park. But it also will create a high intensity of utilization at this edge so that we maximize the site's assets and maximize the ability of visitors to the site to experience the great trees and the great park.
Let's talk about the park. The Signature Park is really the centerpiece of the project. The space is incredibly beautiful in its natural existence right now, and as such, much of the natural feel should remain. We will add some complementary elements to the park that will further promote its use. At the center of the Signature Park will be a large wet pond that will be an amenity to the entire site, as well as serving a useful function for the site. A trail system will crisscross the Signature Park to ensure accessibility to the park for all and the opportunity to take a stroll after dinner or a jog in the early morning. We expect the park to include great family spaces, including a playground for various ages and a space set aside for dogs. A significant portion of the Signature Park will be kept natural for all of us to enjoy as it currently exists.
And I want to take a minute to talk about the Park Road in particular, which runs along the edge of the park here. And you can see in the section here that the park edges are open and permeable, with parking limited to the opposite side of the street. This invites people along the entire edge, maximizing the public perception of the park. Homes front on the park, across streets, never backing on the park, which would make it feel more private. Stormwater can run directly off the street system into the park, also allowing the park to function as a giant sponge for the site's rainwater. And here you can see in this slide that continuous access along the park's edge, represented by these arrows, with primary access points represented by the red circles. The park also functions as a continuation of the west-to-east transect that I've described earlier. That's one of the themes of the plan as a whole. As you move through the park, the more active uses, the restaurants, community lawns, playgrounds, etc., are focused on the west end of the park. And as you move east, the character will grow increasingly natural across the pond to the Shoal Creek Trail and Shoal Creek. Here our goal is to maintain and restore the natural conditions of the site that are so loved today.
Eventually, our hope is that the trail system along Shoal Creek will continue from the south boundary of the project to the north boundary of the project. We have had and will continue to have discussions with the City of Austin and private landowners to try and facilitate these connections, although they will not be a condition of the project's approval with the city. The wildflowers are something that has come up in various conversations we've had with both the BCRC and the neighborhood at large. We wanted to point out that the tract provides a significant opportunity for the growth of these wildflowers, and our objective will be to maintain the current wildflower stock in this area and further promote the health of wildflower growth in these areas by teaming up with local experts to help us foster as hospitable of environment as we can.
And I think the plantings along the Bull Creek frontage, the wildflower plantings there, will create a wonderful display in the spring that all of our neighbors can enjoy each day as they pass by the site. But the most appropriate place on the site to establish a restored prairie ecosystem is closest to Shoal Creek, not adjacent to the development where people need to use the park space. So we've chosen to locate the restored meadow where it makes the most sense and can be most easily maintained, east of the pond near Shoal Creek.
Let's talk about parks and our park relative to some other parks in the area. We believe that great open space comes with a focus on several things. Activation of the space by providing great uses and great access. Further activation of the space through appropriate size and scale and high quality features. The Signature Park accomplishes these things. Because the question has been asked and it's going to come up, we wanted to share with you the size of the space within the park throughout the project. It's difficult to put that into context, and so we created this slide to help. The Terrytown Park, which is a little triangle park located in the heart of Terrytown that serves an incredible function for a good portion of the Terrytown neighborhood, is 2.2 acres. In Clarksville, there's a 3.3 acre park with several playgrounds, a dog park, a pool, and some fields. The West Enfield Park is located at the intersection of the Mopac Access Road on the southbound side and Enfield Road. It includes some ball fields, it includes a pool, as well as some playground equipment. Ramsey Park is an incredible park located just to the east of the project. It's substantial in size and includes significant playground equipment that was part of a recent effort by the neighborhood to add some additional benefit to that park. Reed Park is another phenomenal park located over in the Terrytown area. It's a portion of it's in the floodplain, and it's a linear park with a great pool that's for the most part underutilized because I think a lot of people don't know about it, as well as some playground equipment. There's Brentwood Park as well, which is 8.2 acres. And finally, there's the Grove Park, which is going to be a minimum of 16 acres across the site. The Signature Park portion will be a minimum of 12 acres with 4 additional acres located throughout the rest of the site. So as you can see, the Grove Park is an incredible addition to the neighborhood and will be a great use for the next 100 years. Here's another slide that puts into context the size of the park relative to some of the city's requirements. For the low-density residential option, there's approximately it's actually a little less than 4 acres of park space that's required for the project. For the master plan that we've presented that we're talking about here today, 8 acres of park space would be required for the master plan. Ultimately, we've made the decision to provide a minimum of 16 acres throughout the master plan, more than double the requirement for the site. Okay, let's talk about some of the green belts throughout the project. These green belts will serve as functional connectivity within the project, and they will also serve as great outdoor space that can be utilized as park space as well.
And this green belt, as I mentioned earlier, is aligned with the UT Tower, so it serves to frame a view from the plaza, but it also functions in the opposite direction as basically a communal green space, but also a vector that draws the residential community from throughout the project into the heart of the project, the plaza, and functions as a transition both to the pattern and uses of the project from commercial to residential.
Another key element of the project is the incredible roads. We've termed them green streets, and they really truly will be green streets throughout the project. We want the natural space to continue into the residential portions of the project and throughout the roads located in the project.
And there are 3 primary strategically located green streets on the site shown here on this graphic. These streets will have a very generous cross-section that includes a multi-use trail, which you can see in the section here, as well as biofiltration or bioswale features that serve as part of the site's green infrastructure. There would also be a regular sidewalk on the other side of the street. So this generous cross-section allows for a lot of uses in that area. And you can see from the map that the orientation of these streets is perfect for both the purposes of the trail and the stormwater quality, moving both people and clean stormwater in the direction we want them to go, from Bull Creek Road back into the site, to the park, to the pond, and to Shoal Creek. We also believe that these streets are an incredibly welcoming way for people and vehicles to first enter and experience the site's residential elements.
We have identified several areas throughout the project to help facilitate interaction with the great spaces within. One is a clump of trees that most of you have seen at the front of the project that will become a significant park located on the perimeter of their project adjacent to Bull Creek.
And this park functions as a window into the site, a place where the site lays back even further from Bull Creek Road to welcome in the outside, as well as a great asset for our neighbors in Oakmont and at Westminster.
The trail system and interconnection of the project is something that we heard over and over again from the neighborhood and from our design team. This slide helps depict the great connectivity within the project that will facilitate great broader neighborhood connectivity and engagement. We will have over 1 mile of trails and nearly 2 miles of trails throughout the project.
As you can see, the site is very well linked with itself, and we are working to facilitate greater connections with the neighborhoods around us as well.
Variety is the spice of life, and we'll have a diversity of housing typologies within the project. Townhomes, represented by the little blue boxes on the screen. Zero lot line homes, also blue boxes surrounding a little pocket park. Smaller single-family lots and larger single-family lots located in yellow on the screen. We're at the beginning of a design process that will yield some incredible residential designs through a competitive process between several different architectural firms that we're selecting.
And again, the street section is really critical in the residential area. The street section, as you see here, includes bump outs between the street parking as depicted in the lower left. These bump outs will include rain gardens to treat stormwater and trees to shade the street. Generous sidewalks line both sides of the street, and garages in most cases are moved to the back of the building and serviced off of alleys. This leads to a high-quality, classic neighborhood feel that is very appropriate with the greater density on the site.
If we have created a site 100 years from now that looks like the image in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen where there's an older neighborhood depicted in that image, then we've done a great job. I would be proud of that for some of our residential streets. We'll have a variety of 2-story and 3-story townhomes within the project that reach multiple different sales price points with these offerings as well, as depicted in some of these imagery. One of the things that I mentioned earlier in the presentation that we paid particular attention to was the boundaries of the project and the impact of those boundaries on the surrounding neighborhoods. To the north of the site, we've created a couple cross sections here that depict what that boundary will look like. And we've created those in conjunction with dialogue with the folks that live north of the project. The goal will ultimately be able to provide access to those folks from the backs of their homes, as well as some green space in that area to help ensure the beauty of the space between our homes and their homes. The future homes in our project, we've also located in a way to minimize the impact on their homes. Instead of locating the townhomes backing up to them, we've located them so that only one unit will back up to the lot. We've also restricted that unit to a maximum of 2 stories in height so that it doesn't appear too large in scale relative to their homes.
It's also important to note here that we've designed the site circulation system to ensure that the only traffic who will be inclined to use that access drive against the homes on 45th Street are the residents who live directly off of it, either on 45th Street or within our project. It will not be part of the site's primary circulation system.
We also spent some time with the folks off of Idlewild, and this slide helps depict the scale of the homes that will be located near their homes, which are very similar and complementary in terms of the scale of their existing homes as it is right now.
There's a large amount of existing vegetation along that edge of the site as well, and one of our goals will be to preserve that existing vegetation to provide greater buffer and compatibility along that edge.
Okay, so that concludes the portion of the presentation relating to the presentation of the master plan. Let's talk about traffic. And as you can imagine, traffic has been one of our foremost considerations since we started looking at the project, and we've been working tirelessly to understand the impacts of traffic on the project. So why do we care about traffic? Because the project doesn't work with bad traffic congestion. And as you probably figured out, we worked very hard to not be like other developers, and not enough developers understand and take the appropriate care to address the traffic related to their projects. From the beginning of the project, we've gone to great lengths to study and understand the existing and proposed traffic situation surrounding the project. We've also formulated a traffic strategy to ensure that we minimize the overall traffic impact of the project through improvements to existing infrastructure, as well as fostering alternative transportation connectivity within and surrounding the project. In the coming days, we'll be submitting the traffic impact analysis. We've actually already submitted that to the city. This analysis is required to be submitted at this juncture to help develop an understanding of the potential impact on the broader roadway system. It's required to be submitted as part of the development process that we're going through now. So let me provide a bit of background on how traffic impact analysis, or TIAs, work. So we have several traffic engineers on our team, and I don't intend to summarize their entire professional careers tonight by trying to explain all of the details on how traffic works. But I do want to, however, give an overview of how the science of traffic engineering works so that we can better understand the impact on our lives of traffic that will be added as a result of the project. First off, we have to understand the existing conditions, and we've performed numerous traffic counts at vital intersections in the area surrounding the project. These counts tell us how long the average car waits at the intersection at various times throughout the day. There are peak times, and it's these peak times in the AM and the PM that engineers focus on, because that's when we end up waiting the most at each of those critical intersections. Once we understand the existing conditions, we begin to add in additional trips into the modeling software that we use to determine how the various intersections will perform in conjunction with each other as the project is built and generates additional traffic. Through this exercise, it begins to become apparent which intersections will be the most impacted by the proposed project. As with many things in life, ultimately the analysis boils down to a few simple grades. The grade is assigned based on how long the average car waits at the signal. Grades A through F are given, and most intersections in the Austin area are D's, E's, or F, which probably comes as no surprise to you. The critical intersections around the project are borderline DE intersections, so they're basically low-performing D's or D- intersections. And our goal is to keep them as D intersections and or improve them to better scoring D intersections after we install our improvements and make the modifications that we intend to make that we'll talk about throughout the remainder of this presentation. In our traffic analysis, we identified a critical number of trips that can be generated on site before we have a negative impact on the level of service after improvements are made at these intersections. We basically added a significant trip count to the model until we see a degradation in the level of service performance at these intersections. So I'm going to walk you through the intersections real fast on the screen here. There's an intersection at 45th and Mopac on the northbound side of things, which is a critical intersection. There's an intersection at 45th and Bull Creek, which is the critical intersection, which we'll spend a lot of time talking about today. There's also two other intersections, one at 45th and Mopac on the southbound side of things, and one at 35th and Mopac at Jackson off of 35th Road. the number of trips that in our modeling we added to the key performance at the intersection of Bull Creek and 45th and to all the other intersections, but the key intersection at 45th and Bull Creek is the primary choke point, was 27,000 trips per day. So in other words, we could add an additional 27,000 trips to that intersection after we make our improvements to it and maintain that level of service at that intersection. So let me talk a little bit about what trips are, because 27,000 trips sounds like a lot of trips, and it is a lot of trips. But let me explain to you what exactly a trip is in the science of traffic impact analysis. On the screen, you see a single-family residential house that generates 10 trips per day. You also see a retail use, the La Fonda San Miguel restaurant, that generates 971 trips per day. So the uses obviously direct the number of trips that are created on a daily basis from each project. So what is a trip? I'm going to walk you through an example that helps understand what a trip actually is. So an individual living within the project leaves their home, that counts as a trip. They go get a cup of coffee on their way to work, that's 2 trips. They go to the office, that's 2 trips. They go to lunch, that's 2 trips. They go back to the office, that's 2 trips. They go to the grocery store, that's 2 trips. Finally, they make it back home without ever leaving the project. They generate another trip for a grand total of 12 trips without leaving the project or getting in a car to generate those trips. That's one of the beautiful things about a mixed-use development is some of the traffic that's generated from the project will be internally captured, as is the case in its entirety in this example. I include the example there to help you understand what trip count actually is. So when I say 27,000 trips were added in the modeling to that particular intersection, it doesn't mean 27,000 additional cars are passing through that intersection. It means that 27,000 trips generated, as is the case in this example, from the project will ultimately end up in the roadway system there. But that doesn't mean 27,000 cars. Okay, so let's talk about the traffic impact analysis that we're submitting. So the traffic counts that we talked about at the 27,000 trips sound high. They are high. They're higher than what we think we'll ever possibly need from the project. The 24,000 trips that we've actually submitted in the TIA are also high. And the 24,000 trips are higher than what we think we'll ever need to create the project. Ultimately, our expectation is that with the conceptual master plan, that the trip count generated will be below 20,000 trips per day. And that's 20,000 trips per day of unadjusted raw traffic numbers. There's a concept within the conceptual plan as shown. The project produces less than 20,000 trips per day using unadjusted raw numbers that the TIA produces with no discounting for internal trip capture, pedestrian or bicycle or transportation uses. It also assumes that everyone will get into a vehicle to get to their destination, which is an invalid assumption as it relates to the mixed-use project. And so the trips number that you're seeing in front of you, the 24,000 and even the 20,000, is an unadjusted raw number. And the distinction that I'm trying to make there is that most of the time what you're seeing is you're seeing adjusted numbers. And there's an adjustment that you can take for a mixed-use project that is approximately a 15% downward adjustment for both mixed use and for the different types of bicycle and pedestrian connectivity that we're fostering for the project. And we haven't taken any of those discounts. We're showing you the raw numbers in an effort to be entirely transparent with everybody about what's going into the analysis. Ultimately, those traffic generation discounts, so to speak, will be factored into the analysis as part of the overall science of traffic impact analysis. But this is the raw numbers that we're showing to you. I'm probably the only developer in the world that's ever shown anybody raw numbers, but here they are, so you can see them for what they are. We're submitting the traffic counts because we're required to make this submittal at this juncture in the city's planning process. And it's important to note that if we submit a TIA at 19,000 trips, and then we change the project to use 19,500 trips, then we'll have to start over on the TIA study and resubmit the entire study, even though the intersections will clearly work at that level, which is why we're coming in at the 24,000 trips. We are, however, excited that we could establish sustainable levels of service at each intersection that we are looking at. And most importantly, the intersections that are most impacted by the project maintain the level of service or improve the level of service after our project traffic counts are introduced, along with the improvements that we're proposing to make. The other thing to note here is that the uses that are overwhelmingly requested by the neighborhood are also responsible for creating the predominance of the traffic, meaning that it is the residential and retail uses that drive the traffic generation within the project. Even though we just discussed this number, that this 24,000 number is not terribly relevant to how traffic impact is measured, we're showing these numbers in an abundance of transparency. So let me help put this into context and talk about what it means overall. So how do we stack up? We studied a number of recent and pending infill projects in the Austin area, and we were the lowest trip generation on a per acre basis by far. Here are a few of the projects that you may be familiar with. There's the Triangle at Lamar and Guadalupe. That produces 675 trips per acre. There's the infamous Austin Oaks project, which produces 808 trips per acre. And then there's the South Lamar project, where the Alamo Draft House is located on South Lamar. That produces 1,043 trips. As you can see, the intensity of uses of the Grove is substantially lower than comparable projects in the area. Okay, so the real analysis that we should focus on is wait times or level of service at the key intersections and how we improve or maintain those wait times at those intersections. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the improvements to the project. Specifically, we're going to talk about the improvements at several critical intersections. This particular slide shows the intersection at 45th and Bull Creek. And at that intersection, we're going to make changes so that we can establish greater flow of traffic from east to west. It also represents improvements that we intend to make along Bull Creek, where we're going to widen Bull Creek to 3 lanes in some portions of the frontage across the project. We also intend to install a traffic signal light at the intersection of Jackson and Bull Creek. And this isn't necessarily needed for traffic performance, but it is needed for compatibility with the neighborhood and to foster better pedestrian access to the site primarily from the Westminster project and the Oakmont neighborhood immediately adjacent to the site. The other thing that traffic signal is going to do along Bull Creek is it's going to help slow traffic down along Bull Creek. That doesn't mean it's going to increase wait times. It means it's going to keep people from going 65 miles an hour along Bull Creek, where it's inappropriate in the context of residential neighborhoods that surround that particular road. Okay, so let's talk in detail about the improvements that we're going to make at the 45th and Bull Creek intersection. As you can see, there's existing conditions, and the existing conditions are troublesome in that the east-west connectivity doesn't have direct pass-through through the intersections. There's a possibility of both a left-hand and a right turn, which slows down and congests the intersection substantially. And so our changes, our improvements, will provide a dedicated left-hand turn lane as well as a continuous bypass lane and really 2 lanes ultimately in both directions from the east to the west. The other thing that's worth noting is the widening of Bull Creek to the south. We're going to have a dedicated right turn lane, a dedicated left turn lane, and a dual left turn lane from Bull Creek onto 45th, which should facilitate great traffic impact overall. The other thing that's worth mentioning is that the expansion along 45th isn't going to be an expansion across all of 45th. The expansion and that additional lane that you see there will only extend about 150 to 200 foot to the east of the west of that intersection along 45th Street. The rest of 45th Street will remain unchanged. The other thing that's important to note here is that Milestone intends to pay for the improvements at this intersection in their entirety and to execute on the construction of these improvements. We've been frustrated in the past with certain projects that have taken far too long to be executed because of other priorities within the city. And our intention is to work with the City of Austin to secure the right to put these improvements in as close to day one as possible. Our proportional share of cost of these improvements would be limited to 35%, and we're going to forego the cost share on this intersection, which is typical as part of the development process, and we're going to improve 100% of the intersection at 100% of the cost to us. We're doing that so that the functionality of the intersection is as good as possible for the duration of the project from the beginning all the way throughout the project's life. Okay, so let's talk about the performance of these critical intersections that we've identified after the project. And so really what this is what the performance will be in 2024 after the City of Austin has changed and grown, as well as after our project has been introduced into the area. The 45th and Mopac intersection actually improves, and that improves because of improvements that are being made to that intersection in conjunction with the overall Mopac improvements that are taking place. The 35th and Mopac-Jackson intersection also sees some improvement, and those improvements are a result, those reductions in wait time are a result of the improvements that are being made right now in conjunction with the Mopac expansion. The 45th and Mopac southbound intersection that we identified actually sees a small deterioration in terms of performance, but that performance deterioration exists regardless of whether our project is built. And so it's a function of time and additional traffic load that intersection will see over time, not a function of our project. So if you pull our project out entirely, the performance degradation continues at that intersection regardless of our project. So the primary intersection of focus is the intersection at 45th and Bull Creek, and that goes from a DD to a D plus D, and we're giving ourselves a little D plus there because we actually see a reduction in wait times at that particular intersection. Okay, so we've been asked to work with the neighborhood to develop a comprehensive transportation enhancement plan, which would include things like looking into the extending Shoal Creek Trail from 35th, 38th to 45th, and we have discussed, improved transit stops and with Cap Metro, explore the improvement of bike and pedestrian trails at 45th and Bull Creek, and the connectivity right now at 45th and Bull Creek is really not great, and so that's one of the things that we are very focused on, is trying to make sure that we can get some pedestrian connectivity to the other neighborhoods at that particular intersection. Consider traffic calming measures throughout Oakmont Heights and Allendale, and to strategize for new sidewalks in key offsite areas, and that's a critical part of things to make sure that we are fostering pedestrian connectivity with the project. And then also to study the feasibility of crossing Shoal Creek. That's something that's come up several times in conversations, and we're spending increasingly more time on to see if we can create an opportunity for that. Okay, so what are next steps? We submitted our development assessment and our traffic impact analysis. We're going to continue engaging with the community to refine the plan. That's where we really need your help in this coming 30 to 45 day period. We really want your input so that we can refine this plan and get it to that point of perfection that we talked about earlier. Ultimately and finally, we're going to need your support. Our goal is to create a shared purpose in moving this project forward through the city's process to ensure that the vision that we've created, that we've jointly created, is something that we can actually get to the point of fruition and execution, which is the real challenge that we have coming up.
And now to close this presentation, I'd like to circle back to the beginning. You'll recall near the beginning of this presentation, we shared the 6 guiding principles that we developed from all of the various inputs to measure our project against. So now I'd like to ask how we accomplished each one of these in the plan that's been presented here. So the first principle was create an inviting and integrated project that enhances the experience of the site and its surroundings. So how do we accomplish this? With a wide trail and enhanced wildflower plantings to create an inviting experience along Bull Creek Road, with streets and trails oriented to draw the surrounding community into the project and the park, with great retail to serve the surrounding community, including grocery stores desired by the neighborhood, with a public plaza that creates a community commons for the communities in the area, with a large signature park and multiple others throughout the development for all to enjoy, and with compatibly integrated development with adjacent uses in both type and scale. The second guiding principle was to develop a comprehensive built environment with high-quality parks and open spaces, shaped by massing and appropriately scaled to their context. So how did we accomplish this? Thoughtful treatment of edges along public spaces, with comprehensive designed experiences for people getting to and spending time within those public spaces, with street sections carefully designed and shaped by massing of buildings, with parks and trail systems that accommodate a variety of uses and modes of transportation, with parks that allow for public access to the site's best assets, and with urban and retail uses in close proximity with high-quality open spaces. The third guiding principle was to establish a vibrant, people-oriented development pattern that promotes connectivity and prioritizes pedestrian and bicycle circulation over cars. So how do we accomplish this? With a development centered around vibrant streets and plazas that focus on the people within them, with the distribution of retail, public amenities, and other points of interest to create lively street-level experiences, with street sections that provide generous space and priority for pedestrians and cyclists, and by preservation and dense planting of shade trees throughout the development. The fourth guiding principle was to establish a restorative approach to the development of the site by integrating sustainable strategies and honoring the history and natural character of the land. So how do we accomplish this? With a careful preservation of the site's incredible heritage trees, restoration of wildflower meadows in key locations using the site's native seed stock, by capturing the site's incredible views of downtown and preserving some access to those views for all, by buffering development impacts to Shoal Creek, by utilizing sustainable green infrastructure and green building practices throughout the project, by creating a sustainable water quality pond that also serves as a community amenity and wildlife habitat near Shoal Creek, and by promotion of alternative transportation options. The fifth guiding principle is to create an economically viable development model that maximizes the mix of uses and captures the essence of Austin living. How do we accomplish this? Through density, balanced with sensitivity to the adjacent uses and desire for open space to create a viable community that is a win for all. Through a mix of complementary land uses, people to support businesses, and businesses to service people. Through thoughtful development and quality public spaces that ensure the success of the project, people and businesses will want to be here. An emphasis on local Austin businesses. An orientation of activity and enjoyment around high-quality, shady outdoor spaces, and through key infrastructure improvements to water and roadway systems off-site. The sixth guiding principle is to shift the conventional interaction between developer and neighborhood to a shared purpose relationship. And how are we accomplishing this? Through a collaborative process between the developer and neighborhoods, starting from the very beginning. A shared goal, the best project we can build. Striving towards a balanced development that meets this goal for all, maximizing open space, mitigating traffic, providing desired uses and services, and creating a great Central Austin neighborhood. Through investing in community priorities such as traffic improvements, trail improvements, etc. And through community support that can lead to a more productive process with the city and a win for all. And that's what we're hoping for through this presentation and as the process goes forward.